Emma Parker moved quickly down the quiet hallway of Hayes & Co., clutching a thick stack of reports against her chest. The office was nearly empty, the usual chatter gone, the cubicles dark. Most of the employees had already left for the weekend, but she had stayed late, as she often did. Emma had a reputation for being dedicated, almost too dedicated, and though it sometimes drained her, she couldn't bring herself to leave things unfinished. Tonight she wanted everything perfect for Monday's big review. As she walked toward the elevators, she felt the weight of exhaustion tugging at her shoulders. She sighed softly, brushing a strand of chestnut hair from her face. She had canceled dinner with friends again, telling them she'd make it up next time. Her friends always teased her about working too hard, but deep down, Emma knew it wasn't just about the job. It was about proving herself, about showing she belonged in a place where ambition was everything. She pressed the elevator button, waiting as the red numbers descended. A quiet ding sounded, and the door slid open. She stepped in, relieved she could finally head home, when a voice called out behind her, "Hold the door, Emma." Her breath caught for a moment as she reached instinctively for the button. Daniel Hayes, her boss, stepped inside. Daniel was the kind of man who filled a room without trying. Tall, sharp-featured, always composed. He carried an air of authority that made people straighten their backs whenever he entered. Emma had worked under him for 3 years, and while he was strict and demanding, he was also fair. He never wasted words, never lost control. And yet whenever he spoke directly to her, there was something in his eyes that unsettled her, a quiet warmth that didn't match his usual coolness. "Late night?" he asked, pressing the lobby button. Emma nodded quickly. "Just finishing the reports. I wanted everything ready before Monday." He gave a small smile, almost amused. "I should have known. You're always the last one out." The elevator doors closed, and they began their descent. For a moment, there was only the steady hum of machinery, the faint glow of the ceiling light, and the quiet closeness between them. Emma felt her heart beat faster, though she kept her eyes fixed on the stack of papers in her hands. Then, without warning, the elevator jolted. The lights flickered. The machine gave a sharp groan and lurched to a stop between floors. Emma gasped, grabbing the handrail as the papers nearly slipped from her arms. Her pulse raced, a wave of panic hitting her chest. Daniel immediately moved to the control panel, pressing the emergency button. "Maintenance." He called when the speaker crackled to life, but only static answered. He pressed again, trying other buttons, but nothing happened. Finally, he exhaled and stepped back, his jaw tightening slightly. "We're stuck," Kui said, calm but firm. Emma's throat felt dry. "Stuck, you mean? Until when?" "Until they fix it," he replied. He loosened his tie just slightly, a small gesture of practicality. His calmness should have comforted her, but instead, it only made her more aware of the silence pressing down on them. The small space felt even smaller now. Emma leaned against the wall, trying to steady her breath. "Of course, this would happen tonight," she muttered, tempting to laugh. Daniel glanced at her, and to her surprise, his lips curved into a faint smile. It was rare to see him smile at all, and the sight of it made her chest feel strangely warm. Minutes passed. The elevator didn't budge. Emma shifted, hugging the papers closer, then crouched down to set them neatly in the corner. She could feel Daniel's presence beside her, strong, steady, impossible to ignore. The silence stretched. She could hear the faint rhythm of her heartbeat in her ears. It wasn't just the fear of being trapped, was the awareness of being trapped with him. She finally spoke, her voice soft. "Do you think they'll come soon?" Daniel shrugged lightly. "Depends how quickly they notice we're still here. It's late." His words sent a ripple of unease through her. "Hours? Maybe." She tried to push the thought away, focusing instead on his calm tone. It was strange, she had always seen him as unreachable, untouchable. But here, in this dim elevator, he didn't feel like the flawless boss she had built up in her head. He felt human. Emma studied him quietly. His tie slightly loosened, his sleeves rolled back, his expression less guarded than usual. There was a hint of weariness in his eyes, the kind of tiredness she recognized in herself. And suddenly, She realized how rarely she had ever truly seen him beyond the title of Mr. Hayes. Daniel caught her looking. For a second, their eyes locked. Emma felt heat rise to her cheeks and quickly looked away, pretending to smooth her skirt. But the connection lingered in the air, undeniable, like a current humming between them. The elevator remained motionless, and time seemed to stretch. Every second felt sharper, heavier. Emma thought of how strange it was that in the middle of a frustrating, inconvenient moment, she had never felt so awake. So aware of another person, Daniel leaned back against the opposite wall, his gaze thoughtful. He didn't speak, and neither did she. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full, charged. Carrying a weight neither of them dared name. Emma's hands tightened around the hem of her skirt, her thoughts racing. She had always kept her feelings carefully buried, always convincing herself it was impossible. He was her boss, her superior, a man who commanded respect. But in that elevator, stripped of titles, stripped of control, he was just Daniel. And that realization scared her almost as much as it thrilled her. The machinery groaned again, making Emma jump. Daniel's steady voice came immediately, calm and reassuring. "It's okay. It's just pressure shifting." His words settled her, but the flutter in her chest didn't stop. It wasn't just for it was something else, something she didn't want to admit. She leaned back against the cool wall, exhaling slowly. "Well," she said softly, almost to herself, "looks like we're going to be here for a while." Daniel's eyes met hers again, steady and unreadable. For a moment, Emma thought she saw something flicker. There's something unspoken. Something dangerous and beautiful all at once, and in that suspended moment. As the elevator held them prisoner between two floors, Emma realized that nothing about this night would be ordinary. The air inside the elevator grew heavier with every passing minute. Emma sat on the floor, her knees drawn slightly up, her back resting against the cool metal wall. Daniel stood for a while, tall and calm, his hand in his pocket, watching the panel as if it might suddenly light up again. But nothing changed. Finally, he sighed and slid down across from her. The sound of his movements echoed in the small space, making the silence feel even sharper. Emma glanced at him, her chest tight with nerves. She had never seen him like this before, without the shield of authority, without the distance of an office desk between them. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The elevator was still, the faint hum of the emergency light above them the only sound. Emma's mind wandered, and she realized she had no idea how much time had passed. 10 minutes. 20, an hour. She shifted slightly, her voice breaking the quiet. "I can't believe we're stuck here. I was supposed to call my friend an hour ago. She's going to think I vanished." Daniel gave a low chuckle, leaning back. "At least you're not missing anything exciting. I was supposed to meet with a client tomorrow morning, but now—" He trailed off, rubbing his forehead with his hand. Emma tilted her head. "Do you ever wonder if we work too much?" The words slipped out before she could stop herself. She almost regretted asking after all. Daniel was the kind of man who thrived on work, who never seemed to take a break. But to her surprise, he didn't dismiss the thought. Instead, he looked at her quietly, his expression softer than usual. "All the time," he admitted. "But I've built my life around it. Sometimes I don't know how to stop." Emma blinked, startled by his honesty. She had expected him to brush it off, not reveal something so vulnerable. For the first time, she saw him not as the man who signed her paychecks, but as someone who carried his own burdens, his own quiet battles. Encouraged, she leaned forward slightly. "I know what you mean. People always think I love staying late, but honestly, sometimes I just don't want to go home. It's easier to bury myself in work than face how empty my apartment feels." Her voice trembled on the last words, but she didn't take them back. Maybe it was the trapped space, maybe it was the dim light. But something about being here with him made her speak truths she usually kept hidden. Daniel's eyes stayed on her, steady, thoughtful. "I didn't know you felt that way." She shrugged, a small, nervous smile on her lips. "Why would you? I don't exactly broadcast it." People think I'm strong, so I let them think it. But sometimes I wish someone would notice." The words hung between them, vulnerable and raw. Emma bit her lip, suddenly self-conscious. She didn't usually talk like this. She didn't let anyone in. And yet, here she was, exposing her heart to the one man she had sworn to keep her guard up around. Daniel's voice was quiet when he answered. "Emma, I noticed." Her head snapped up, her eyes meeting his. He didn't flinch, didn't look away. There was no trace of his usual stern distance. Instead, his gaze was filled with something she couldn't quite name, something that made her chest tighten. Her pulse quickened. Her mind screamed that this was dangerous. He was her boss. This could change everything. And yet her heart whispered something else, that maybe, just maybe, this was the moment she had been waiting for. Emma's lips parted, as if to respond, but no words came. Her voice felt trapped in her chest. The elevator creaked suddenly, making her jolt. The moment cracked, reality rushing back in. Daniel straightened slightly, his expression shifting back to calm control. Though his eyes still held that unspoken truth, Emma hugged her arms around herself, her heart pounding. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew nothing between them could ever return to what it was before. And in that suspended stillness, trapped between floors, Emma realized she wasn't afraid of the elevator anymore. She was afraid of how much she wanted him to keep talking, afraid of how much she wanted to hear what else he had been holding back. Time in the elevator seemed to stretch endlessly, yet at the same time, it passed too quickly. Emma remained seated on the floor, her hands resting lightly on her knees. The faint hum of the emergency light above them made the small space feel even more intimate. Daniel had moved closer, sitting down across from her, his presence warm and calm. Every small gesture, his relaxed posture, the way his gaze never left her face, made Emma's heart race. She wasn't sure if it was the tension of being trapped or the realization of how much she had wanted to be noticed by him. Emma shifted slightly, tugging at her skirt, which had caught slightly on the corner of her chair earlier. She felt suddenly self-conscious, aware of every detail in the cramped space. Daniel's eyes followed her movement. Without a word, he leaned forward and took off his suit jacket. He gently draped it over her knees, covering her. "Here," he said quietly. "Don't worry about it." The simplicity of the gesture struck Emma in a way she didn't expect. No grand declaration, no awkward comment, just a quiet, thoughtful act that made her feel safe, seen, and cared for all at once. She whispered a soft thank you, her voice barely audible. Daniel nodded, his eyes holding hers with a strange intensity. He didn't speak for a moment, letting the silence stretch between them. The elevator, though still not moving, felt less like a trap now and more like a shared space, where walls and rules didn't exist. "You know," he said softly, breaking the silence, "I've tried to ignore this for months. I didn't think I could, but being here with you, it's impossible to pretend anymore." Emma's breath caught. "Ignore what?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly, though she tried to keep it steady. "The way I feel about you?" Daniel admitted, his tone low, almost hesitant, yet sincere. The words hung in the air like a fragile promise, making Emma's chest tighten. She had always known there was a subtle connection between them, a kind of quiet understanding. But hearing it spoken aloud changed everything. Her heart pounded, a mixture of fear, excitement, and longing surging all at once. She wanted to say something, anything, but her mind seemed to freeze. The honesty in his voice left her stunned, yet thrilled. She had spent so long hiding her own feelings, convincing herself that boundaries and rules were absolute. And yet, here he was, revealing the truth she had only dreamed of hearing. Daniel leaned back slightly, watching her reaction with patience. He didn't push, didn't insist, but the intensity of his gaze made it impossible to look away. Emma felt her pulse quicken, her cheeks flushing. She had never imagined being seen in this way, not as an employee, not as a colleague, but as a person who mattered deeply to someone else. The elevator remained motionless, yet time seemed to stand still. The moment was charged, a delicate tension that neither of them wanted to break, but both knew couldn't last forever. Emma's mind raced. She thought of the office, the rules, the boundaries that should never be crossed. And yet she also thought of this moment, of the warmth and care she felt from him. And she realized that her heart was already ignoring all caution. Daniel shifted slightly closer, his voice soft. "I've watched you work, Emma. I've watched you carry yourself, your dedication, your strength. And I've wanted to tell you for so long, but I didn't know how." Emma's throat tightened. She wanted to reach out, to bridge the small space between them, but uncertainty held her back. She was terrified of what this might mean, yet unable to deny the pull she felt toward him. "You don't have to say anything," Daniel continued gently. "Just know that what I feel, it's real, and I can't hide it anymore." Her breath hitched. "But we're trapped here," she said softly, a nervous laugh escaping her. "This isn't normal. It's just the elevator." Daniel shook his head slightly, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Maybe, but sometimes truth doesn't need normal circumstances. Sometimes it just needs honesty." Emma stared at him, her thoughts tangled with emotion. The calm strength he exuded, the gentle care, the vulnerability he allowed her to sit was overwhelming. She felt exposed, yet strangely safe. She wanted to speak, to respond, but all that came out was a quiet "I." "I don't know what to say." "It's okay," he said softly. "You don't have to say anything yet. Just feel it." And she did. She felt it, the warmth, the longing, the undeniable connection that had been building for months, perhaps years. The air between them seemed to hum with unspoken possibilities. The elevator, once a place of fear and confinement, had transformed into a quiet sanctuary, a place where words weren't always needed, where feelings could be shared in silence. Daniel leaned back slightly, his eyes still on her, waiting patiently. Emma finally found the courage to speak. "Daniel, I've always felt something too. I didn't think it was." Aloud. He nodded, understanding clear in his expression. "I know, and we've both held it in for far too long. But tonight, I want to change that. Even if just for this moment." Emma's heart raced. She couldn't remember the last time she had felt so seen, so understood. All the fears, all the doubts melted away under the intensity of his gaze. It was a delicate, tentative connection, but it was there, undeniable and real. Then, as the moment seemed suspended forever, the elevator shuddered slightly. A low hum of the machinery echoed through the space. Emma's chest tightened, half relief, half disappointment. Reality was creeping back in. The moment was fleeting, fragile, yet unforgettable. Daniel leaned forward slightly, his voice a soft whisper. "No matter what happens, Emma, remember this? Remember that I see you, and that I've wanted you to know for a long time." Emma nodded, tears threatening to rise. She had never imagined such honesty, such warmth from him. "I'll remember," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The elevator remained stuck, but the tension had changed. It was no longer fear or frustration. It was anticipation, longing, and a fragile hope that something beautiful could emerge from this unlikely moment. In that small, confined space, Emma realized that being trapped wasn't the worst thing in the world. In fact, it had given her something she had secretly craved, the chance to see Daniel as he truly was, and to allow herself to be seen in return. And as they sat there, side by side yet not touching, a gentle, unspoken promise lingered in the air. A promise that whatever happened next, whether in this elevator or out in the world beyond, it was no longer about work or rules or fear. It was about something deeper, something real, something worth waiting for. The quiet hum of the emergency light continued above them, a soft reminder that the outside world existed, but in this moment it didn't matter. Emma and Daniel were suspended in time, caught between fear and desire, uncertainty and truth, and neither wanted to break the fragile connection they had found. For Emma, this night had transformed from a simple late-work evening into a revelation. And as she looked at Daniel, the man who had always seemed untouchable, She felt the first stirrings of hope, of possibility, of a connection that could change everything. Time in the elevator seemed to stretch endlessly. Yet at the same time, it passed too quickly. Emma remained seated on the floor, her hands resting lightly on her knees. The faint hum of the emergency light above them made the small space feel even more intimate. Daniel had moved closer, sitting down across from her, his presence warm and calm. Every small gesture, his relaxed posture, the way his gaze never left her face, made Emma's heart race. She wasn't sure if it was the tension of being trapped or the realization of how much she had wanted to be noticed by him. Emma shifted slightly, tugging at her skirt, which had caught slightly on the corner of her chair earlier. She felt suddenly self-conscious, aware of every detail in the cramped space. Daniel's eyes followed her movement. Without a word, he leaned forward and took off his suit jacket. He gently draped it over her knees, covering her. "Here," he said quietly. "Don't worry about it." The simplicity of the gesture struck Emma in a way she didn't expect. No grand declaration, no awkward comment, just a quiet, thoughtful act that made her feel safe, seen, and cared for all at once. She whispered a soft thank you, her voice barely audible. Daniel nodded, his eyes holding hers with a strange intensity. He didn't speak for a moment, letting the silence stretch between them. The elevator, though still not moving, felt less like a trap now and more like a shared space, where walls and rules didn't exist. "You know," he said softly, breaking the silence, "I've tried to ignore this for months. I didn't think I could, but being here with you, it's impossible to pretend anymore." The elevator shuddered suddenly, a low rumble echoing through the small space. Emma's heart jumped. The emergency light flickered, casting shifting shadows across the walls. After what felt like hours suspended between floors, the machinery roared back to life. Slowly, the elevator began moving again, gliding downward with a soft hum. Emma instinctively stood, brushing at her skirt and adjusting her papers. Her hands trembled slightly, though she didn't know if it was from relief, nerves, or the lingering emotions of the past hour. She could feel Daniel's presence beside her, steady and calm, though something about the way he carried himself had changed. He wasn't just her boss anymore. He was a man who had revealed a side of himself she hadn't seen before, and it had shifted something inside her. The elevator descended smoothly, but both of them seemed hesitant to speak. Words from earlier still hung in the air, heavy and charged. Emma's mind raced. What had just happened between them? Was it real, or was it just the stress and closeness of being trapped? The questions twisted in her chest, but one feeling was undeniable. She had never felt so seen, so understood, and so connected to anyone before. Daniel finally broke the silence, his voice low and careful. "Emma, about what I said. I mean it, every word." She swallowed hard, her pulse quickening. She wanted to respond, to pour out the same feelings she had been holding back for so long. But the weight of the moment made her hesitate. She had always been cautious, measured, careful to follow rules. And yet, sitting here with him, she wanted to forget all of that. The elevator slowed, approaching the lobby floor. The hum of the machinery changed pitch, and Emma's stomach twisted with a mixture of relief and reluctance. Relief because they were about to be free, and reluctance because it meant the moment the fragile, suspended world they had shared was ending. Daniel stood first, offering his hand to help her up. The gesture was simple, but in that instant, Emma felt every unspoken emotion pass between them. She took his hand, her fingers brushing against his. The touch was brief but electric, a reminder that everything they had felt in the past hour was real. They stepped toward the elevator doors as they slid open, revealing the quiet lobby. The building was empty, the lights soft and warm. The world outside the elevator seemed normal and ordinary. But the air between them had changed irreversibly. Emma turned to him, her voice soft but filled with urgency. "Daniel, was that real? Or was it just because we were stuck?" He met her gaze, his eyes steady and unwavering. There was no hesitation, no doubt. "It's real. I've felt it for a long time. And being here like this, I couldn't ignore it anymore." Her chest tightened. She had imagined this moment countless times in her head, always afraid it would feel awkward or impossible. But now, standing here with him, she realized it was even more overwhelming than she had imagined. It was real, it was raw, and it was filled with possibilities. Daniel leaned slightly closer, lowering his voice. I don't want to say everything here, not in the lobby, not like this. But I want you to know. I care. I've always cared more than I let on. Emma felt her throat tighten, tears threatening to rise. She wanted to speak, to tell him how she had felt, how she had longed for him. But words felt too fragile to carry the weight of her emotions. Instead, she nodded, letting her silence speak for her. He smiled faintly. The kind of smile that made the small tension in her chest soften. Dinner tomorrow, he said gently, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Just us. No work, no distractions. I want to see you outside the office in a place where we can be ourselves. Her heart skipped a beat. I'd like that, she whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and excitement. She realized that for the first time in years, she wanted to step into the unknown. To take a chance on something that could change everything. The lobby felt unusually quiet as they walked toward the exit. Every step was filled with a strange tension, a mixture of anticipation and the lingering thrill of the elevator moment. Emma felt lighter somehow, as if a weight she had been carrying had lifted. She had been seen, truly seen, and it changed everything. Daniel walked beside her, close enough that she could feel his presence without being intrusive. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with unspoken understanding. They didn't need to rush to fill it with words. Sometimes, Emma realized, silence could speak louder than anything else as they reached the front doors of the building. The city lights spilled across the marble floor. Emma paused, glancing at him. I can't believe this happened, she said softly. I never expected. She trailed off, unsure how to finish the sentence. Daniel's expression softened. Neither did I, he admitted. But sometimes life surprises you in the strangest ways. Emma smiled faintly, feeling a mixture of nervousness and hope. She had spent so long trying to control everything, her work, her emotions, her life, and yet in a single evening everything had shifted. She had allowed herself to feel, to be vulnerable, and it had led her here. Standing with a man who saw her, who cared for her, and who wanted something more. The elevator incident. Once a source of fear and frustration, now felt like a gift. It had broken the walls they had both built around themselves. It had forced honesty, vulnerability, and connection. And as they prepared to part ways for the night, Emma felt something she hadn't felt in years: anticipation, hope, and the thrilling possibility of something new. Daniel looked at her, a gentle intensity in his eyes. Tomorrow night, he repeated, as if to remind both of them that this was just the beginning. We'll talk, we'll laugh, and maybe, just maybe, we'll figure out what this is between us. Emma nodded, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. I'll be there, she said softly, her voice carrying a quiet certainty. For a long moment, they stood there, neither moving, both reluctant to let go of the fragile connection they had discovered. Then, with a final glance and a small smile, Daniel stepped away. Disappearing into the quiet city streets, Emma watched him go, her mind swirling with emotions she hadn't expected to feel. The elevator, the long conversations, the gestures. The confessions, they were all part of something larger, something transformative. She realized that life was unpredictable, full of moments that could change everything in an instant. And tonight had been one of those moments as she turned to leave herself. Emma felt a strange mix of relief, longing, and anticipation. She had been seen, she had been understood, and she had been given a promise that there could be more. And for the first time in a long time, she believed it could be real. The night air was cool against her skin as she stepped out of the building. But inside, her heart was warm, racing with hope. The elevator, once a place of fear and confinement, had become a place of revelation, honesty, and possibility. And Emma knew that whatever came next, she was ready to take that step to embrace the unexpected. and to see where this connection could lead.